Welcome to Logan's Comics, where legends are forged, choices carry weight, and every hero learns what it truly means to stand for something greater. Bobby Steele never asked to be a symbol. He never dreamed of standing beneath stadium lights, never imagined his name echoing through crowds who wanted a savior, not a man. Yet fate has a habit of choosing people long before they choose themselves. For Bobby, it began with a promise, simple, fragile, and spoken by a man who wanted to do good in a world that kept breaking around him. A promise that one day he would become the best version of himself, even if that version felt impossibly far away. Bobby grew up surrounded by the ghosts of expectations. His father served, his brother served, and everyone believed Bobby would follow that same straight path. But life is rarely straight, and even heroes stumble long before they rise. He struggled to find his identity, caught between a need to prove himself and the fear of failing the people who believed in him. That fear grew loud, louder than reason, louder than hope. It pushed him down roads he never intended to walk, roads paved with desperation and regret. Yet even in the darkest corners of his story, Bobby carried something important. He cared. Too much, maybe, enough to hurt, enough to break, enough to stand up again when most people wouldn't. And when the initiative came calling, when the world needed a new generation of heroes, Bobby Steele saw a chance to rewrite the story he thought was already over. They called him Anthem, a name meant to inspire, a name meant to lead, a name meant to echo across a nation searching for direction. But behind that bright title stood a man still learning how to hold himself together. The power coursing through his veins wasn't magic, wasn't alien. It was the result of an upgrade that pushed his body beyond human limits. Strength, speed, focus. A near-perfect soldier designed not just to fight, but to embody something larger than himself. But power never erases doubt. And when Anthem first stepped into the world as the leader of his unit, he felt the weight of every eye, every expectation, every silent hope that he would not turn out to be another flawed symbol in a long line of flawed symbols. And maybe that weight carved him into something stronger. The Order became his family, not by blood, not even by choice, but by grit, trust, and shared battles. They weren't perfect. They weren't polished. They were a mosaic of broken people trying to hold together a world that kept cracking at the edges. And as their leader, Anthem made it his mission to be the anchor they deserved. But leadership is never that simple. You can inspire people with courage, but you bond them with vulnerability. Bobby learned that the hard way. Every mission pushed him closer to confronting the parts of himself he tried to bury, the past he hid behind patriotic colors, the failures he masked beneath a calm, commanding voice. Yet each time he faced danger, each time he saw fear in his team's eyes, Bobby found the strength to push forward. Because Anthem wasn't just a name, it was a promise. As threats rose from the shadows, criminal empires, rogue enhancements, forces that wanted to tear apart the fragile systems holding society together, Anthem became the voice that steadied the storm. He wasn't the loudest fighter nor the most powerful, but he was the one who stepped forward when others hesitated, the one who stood firm even when fear clawed at his ribs, the one who learned that true leadership isn't about being unbreakable, it's about breaking, healing, and standing back up anyway. But greatness always comes with a price, and Anthem learned that every choice has consequences. The world saw him as a shining emblem of hope, but inside, Bobby wrestled with a truth that became harder to ignore. You cannot run from the past, not forever. And the past was coming, faster than he could prepare for, stronger than he could admit. The crack in Bobby's armor started small. A moment, a warning, a reminder that the human heart does not steel itself just because the body does. It happened during a mission that should have been routine, an operation meant to demonstrate the Order's discipline, precision, and unity. But deep within the chaos, Bobby froze, not because he lacked courage, but because courage sometimes buckles beneath the weight of memory. He saw a flash of his old life, a moment from the days before Anthem existed, before the upgrades, before the responsibility. A memory of running from who he used to be, of disappointing someone he cared about, of falling short in ways that still scarred him. The battlefield faded, the world blurred, and for a heartbeat, Bobby Steele wasn't Anthem. He was just a man trapped in the echo of his mistakes. The moment passed, but the damage lingered. His hesitation nearly cost a teammate their life. And in that instant, Anthem understood a truth that leaders rarely speak aloud. The hardest battles are the ones fought in silence. Still, he refused to let that moment define him. Anthem forced himself to train harder, push further, and lead with a clarity he didn't always feel. His team trusted him, because he earned their trust not through perfection but through effort, through honesty. through the quiet conviction that no matter what darkness lived inside him, he would never let it control him again. But darkness has a way of waiting, watching, growing. The Order soon found themselves facing threats none of them were prepared for, enemies who didn't just challenge their strength, but their purpose. Forces that sought not to defeat them, but to expose the flaws within them. Anthem confronted opponents who were reflections of everything he feared he might become. Symbols twisted into weapons, power corrupted by ego, heroes who forgot why they rose in the first place. Every confrontation chipped away at the idea that a symbol could remain pure, and that terrified Bobby. Yet every time he faltered, his team became the mirror that reminded him of who he was becoming, not who he used to be. They saw the man behind the mask. They recognized the doubts he tried to bury. And they followed him because he showed them something rare, strength rooted in humility. Anthem realized then that leadership is not about being better than the people you guide. It's about being willing to rise alongside them. As challenges escalated, Bobby learned to lean into his humanity rather than hide from it. His past didn't vanish, but it stopped controlling him. He began to rebuild himself not as the perfect soldier, but as the honest one. And when the world threatened to tear his team apart, politics, pressure, manufactured scandals, Anthem stood firm. He faced down impossible moral choices, knowing that every decision would reshape not just his life, but the lives of the people who trusted him. He chose integrity. He chose courage. He chose to be Anthem, not because the world needed a symbol, but because he needed to become someone he could believe in. That was the moment he truly began to rise. One last crisis would define him. Not a grand, cosmic battle, not a world-ending catastrophe, something more intimate, more human, the unraveling of the Order itself. The pressures, the scrutiny, the expectations, the political manipulation surrounding their existence, all of it built toward a boiling point. And when that moment came, Anthem felt the weight of every promise he'd made and every one he feared he couldn't keep. Whispers of disbandment spread faster than any enemy. It wasn't fists or lasers or explosions that threatened them. It was doubt. The kind of creeping, corrosive doubt that turns teammates against each other and fractures trust that once felt unbreakable. Anthem stood in the center of it, breathing hard, feeling the world he fought to build slipping through his fingers. For a man once buried by his past, losing the family he found in the Order felt like losing himself all over again. But Bobby Steele didn't break, not this time. He stepped forward not as a symbol, but as a man who finally understood what leadership meant. He spoke, not with the booming certainty of a flawless hero, but with the grounded honesty of someone who had learned to rise from his mistakes. He reminded his team who they were, why they started, what they meant to one another, not as soldiers, not as icons, but as people. Humans struggling to do good in a world that constantly tested their limits. And slowly, piece by piece, the fractures stopped widening. Not because Anthem had all the answers, but because he offered something stronger than answers: unity. The Order eventually faced its end, not in failure, but in transformation. Their legacy lived on in the people they saved, the ideals they upheld, and the lives they touched. Anthem didn't walk away as a broken man searching for redemption. He walked away with a deeper truth carved into him. You don't become a hero by being flawless. You become one by choosing to rise after every fall. Bobby Steele left behind the armor, the name, the expectations, and the spotlight, but not the purpose. The world might forget symbols, but it never forgets the people willing to fight for something better. Anthem may not roar across the skies like gods or titans, but he stands tall among them because he understands what they often forget. A symbol is only powerful when the person behind it is real. And Bobby Steele is as real and as heroic as they come.